All right, so today we're diving into something really fascinating, I think.
Yeah?
We're looking at modern China, but
Right.
through a really unique lens.
Yeah.
We're using this book, Private Revolutions,
hmm
and it follows 4 women, and it's their individual stories.
Yeah, it's really interesting, actually, how the book takes this
Right.
huge, complex topic and it makes it something we can all relate to.
Yeah.
We hear about China's economic boom all the time.
Right.
But this book shows us what that actually looked like
Exactly, yeah.
for the people living through it.
Instead of this broad, like, a view,
Yeah.
we're getting, like, down in the streets, in the homes.
Exactly.
With Siyu and June and Leia and Sam.
And it's amazing how their stories, challenge those simple narratives about China. It's not just about becoming a global superpower.
Right.
It's about the human cost,
Yeah.
the resilience, the choices people made
Right.
to carve out their own paths.
It reminds us there's not just one China story, right?
Exactly.
So where do we even start?
Well, let's start with Siyu.
Okay.
Her family's experience, it's almost a perfect example
Okay.
of how China's economic reforms played out.
Okay.
So picture this. 1980s, Deng Xiaoping's opening up the economy, and Siyu's family, they decide to move to Shenzhen,
Shenzhen.
this brand new special economic zone.
Oh, wow.
They're chasing the Chinese dream, right? Opportunity, a better life.
Yeah. It's like what they call it the Wild West, but in China.
Exactly. Her parents, they start factories making, electronics.
Okay.
They're working incredibly hard. They become successful.
Right.
But, of course, it's not that simple.
Right. There's always a but. Right.
Always a but.
Yeah.
So you start to see this clash between the old China and the new.
Okay.
The book talks about how local officials would demand bribes,
Oh, wow.
and when her father refused, let's just say they weren't too happy.
Yeah, I can imagine.
They actually cut off the electricity to their home.
No way.
It's hard to believe, but that's how it was.
Really shows the corruption. Right?
Exactly. Even with this new system, the old problems remain.
And CU's in the middle of all this.
Yeah. Imagine being her.
That's a lot of pressure.
Oh, absolutely. And on top of that, she has to adjust to Shenzhen too. New city, new school, a whole different world.
Yeah. What was that like for her?
It was a huge culture shock. She went from her small village to a school where everyone spoke mostly Cantonese.
And she spoke Mandarin.
Right. So there's a language barrier on top of everything else. And then she's seeing this incredible wealth, right in her face for the first time. Kids with more money than she could imagine.
Wow. So she's dealing with all this change at home, and then at school, it's a whole different world.
Exactly. It's a lot for anyone, let alone a young person, to handle.
Yeah, for sure. So how does she cope?
Well, she found her escape in English. She
Yeah.
just threw herself into learning it. For her, it represented a way out, a bigger, freer world.
It's like she's craving this different kind of freedom, a way to break free from all these pressures.
Absolutely. And, that's a theme we see with a lot of these women. It's desire for agency, for control, in a society that's changing so fast around them.
It makes you think about how much our environment, especially when we're young, shapes who we become.
For sure.
Yeah.
But for CU, that journey, it starts with a new language, a new way of seeing the world beyond her immediate circumstances.
That's really interesting. Okay, so we've seen the challenges and I guess the opportunities of China's economic boom through CU's story.
Right.
But now I kind of want to switch gears a bit. Let's talk about June.
Okay.
Her story, I think, really highlights the realities for many in rural China.
Yeah, it's a tough one. She grows up in a remote village, facing poverty from a young age. Her family relies on her labor, and even more on the money her mother sends back from the coal mines.
The coal mine.
Yeah. Dangerous work, but often the only option.
It's a difficult situation to be in. And then, didn't her father get sick?
He did. And the medical bills just piled up. Her mother felt like she had no choice but to keep working in the mines just to try to keep them afloat.
Oh, wow.
And then, tragically, there's an accident. It's heartbreaking, And it really highlights that lack of safety nets.
Yeah.
In so many parts of rural China, one event can push a family into, desperate poverty.
It's that feeling of being trapped, almost.
It is.
It's like, how do you even begin to break free from that cycle? But June, she has this incredible drive.
She does.
This determination to make something better for herself.
Yeah, and for her, that path forward becomes education. She manages to get into high school.
Which is huge in itself.
Huge, especially coming from where she did.
Yeah.
But even then, it's this constant uphill battle.
Like, what did that look like for her practically?
So she's basically on her own, living in this tiny little apartment,
Yeah.
barely scraping by, and trying to keep up with her studies at the same time.
That takes incredible resilience.
It does. And you know what kept her going? She found these podcasts by Yuan Hong.
Okay.
He's the founder of New Oriental. It's this like massive education company in China.
I've heard of it, yeah.
And she said his story, it gave her hope. Like,
Yeah.
even in these really difficult circumstances, you can still achieve something.
It's like finding that little glimmer of hope, you know, when you need it most.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've seen the challenges of navigating this economic boom with CU, the realities of rural poverty with June. Now with Leia, I feel like we're entering a whole different world, the world of migrant workers.
Absolutely. And this is huge, right?
Yeah.
Millions of people leaving their villages to find work
Right.
in the factories. And Leia's story, it really captures that whole experience.
Yeah, the hopes, anxieties, the exploitation, everything.
Yeah, all of it. And she starts so young,
How young are we talking?
15. She uses a fake ID
Wow.
to get a factory job.
I mean, I guess that was pretty common back then.
It was. That desire for a better life, it often outweighed the risks. And the factories, you know, they weren't always what they promised.
Right.
Long hours, demanding bosses, even withholding wages sometimes.
That's awful. And Leia, she actually experiences all of that.
She does. These grueling shifts, the pressure to meet quotas, and then seeing her pay disappear.
She must have felt so powerless.
She did it first, but what's amazing is that she learns. She starts to understand her rights as a worker.
Okay, so she doesn't just accept it.
No, not at all. There's this one story, it's incredible. She organizes all of her dorm mates
Okay.
to resign all at once
Yeah.
from this factory that was mistreating them.
So she goes from feeling powerless to actually taking action.
Yes, and it doesn't stop there. Eventually, she actually ends up working for this labor rights NGO.
Oh, wow. So she's helping other workers.
Exactly, helping them understand their rights, advocating for better working conditions.
That's really incredible. She goes from like a victim of the system to someone actively trying to change it.
And her story, it speaks to this larger trend in China, the growth of the labor movement.
Especially in those factory towns, right?
Exactly. Places like Shenzhen. Workers realizing they have power when they organize, when they speak up.
So we're not just seeing individual action anymore. We're seeing this like collective action starting to emerge.
Exactly. And that brings us to Sam. Now, her story, it's a little different.
Okay, how so?
Well, she comes from a more privileged background, middle class, grew up in Shenzhen, had access to books, to different perspectives.
So she wasn't necessarily facing those same economic hardships as CU or June or Leia.
Right. But she's also very politically aware, very active.
And where did that awareness come from?
Well, it starts with the summer camp she attends in college.
Yeah.
A labor rights summer camp.
Okay.
And she's learning about the struggles of workers, like Leia.
Right.
And it really has a profound impact on
Or
her.
it's like she's going from studying these ideas in the classroom to actually seeing them play out in real life.
Exactly. And she actually goes and meets with workers who were injured at Foxconn.
Foxconn, the company that like manufactures iPhones.
The one and only.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's a real eye-opener for her.
Yeah. It makes you think about the human cost of all of this, right?
It does. And her activism, it doesn't stop there.
Okay.
She joins the Student Marxist Society. She participates in protests.
Wow.
She even starts writing for this blog, and it was openly critical of the government.
Which, I mean, that can be risky in China.
It can be very risky.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happens. The government cracks down
On Sam.
on her, on student activists, on independent media, anyone seen as a threat, really.
Yeah.
Anyone who speaks out, really.
Yeah.
It's a stark reminder, I think, of those limits on dissent.
Yeah, even for someone like Sam, with those advantages, there are still consequences. So we've met these four women, their lives so different,
Right.
yet connected by these larger forces shaping China. Did you find any like common threads running through their stories?
Definitely. I mean, at the heart of it, these are stories about change, right? How individuals navigate it, make sense of it, try to shape it.
Yeah.
And that's something we all can relate to, no matter where we live or what our background is.
Yeah, for sure. Like, take education. We often talk about it as this key to upward mobility.
Right, that classic narrative.
And we see that drive, definitely, in the book. But then you look at June's story, and it's like, even with education, she's still battling these huge systemic barriers.
Absolutely. It shows that individual effort, while important, can only take you so far. And then you have Leia, and her experience, I think, speaks to so many migrant workers.
The sheer scale of it. Millions of people searching for a better life.
And the challenges they face. It's not always this simple, happy ending.
Yeah, it makes you question that whole idea of progress.
It does. Like, who defines what progress even means? Who benefits and who gets left behind?
Those are the kinds of questions, like, even if you've never been to China.
Exactly.
These stories, they stay with you.
They make you think about your own community, your own life even.
And how we're all navigating these huge, complex forces. Private revolutions, it doesn't offer any easy answers,
It doesn't.
but it really does leave you with this deeper understanding of the human cost of change. And I think the power of these individual stories
Right.
to make us think differently about the world around us.
Couldn't said it better myself.
Well, on that note, this has been such a fascinating conversation. I always learn so much from our deep dives. Thanks for joining me, and to everyone listening, we'll see you next time for another deep dive.